Hey, it's Nikki. And now this episode, it's a special episode where I am a guest on a really great podcast. I hope you enjoy it.
This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from PeopleForward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self.
Hey everyone, it's Rosie. I am so excited in particular for this edition of the Courageous Leadership Series. We do these once a quarter on the feed where my dear friend, Nikki, Lewallen, Gregory from the PeopleForward Network and Gut Plus Science turns the tables on me, and we have just a jam session, geek out conversation. Sometimes it turns into a coaching session for her as she's going through her own courageous leadership journey and what we talk about. And what we're doing for this year's series is that we are unpacking the research that we've done, uncovering what it takes to future-proof leadership within yourself and within your organization. And so in this conversation, we really focus on why leaders are stuck and why change is so hard. And we give a lot of different examples of what that looks like and kind of some of the high-level things that we learned from our research. We talk about what it means to live and work in a VUCA world. We talk about impression management. We talk a little bit about some of the faulty programs and how they show up. We talk about the types of changes that we face and why we need to think differently about how we move through them. And you're going to want to stay around and listen till the end because we have a coupon code for $100 off our next Courageous Leadership program, which is coming up in April. It is April 29th and 30th. We also have one later this year. And so you're going to want to stay around till the end to listen for that coupon code. We also talk at the end where you can download our white paper. So lots of good stuff, and there will be notes in the show notes as well. So hopefully you get a ton out of this. I would love to hear from you what opened up for you from this conversation, and have your pen and paper ready or your keyboard ready, however you take notes, because lots of great nuggets in this one.
Hello, it's Nikki, Lewallen, Gregory, and I am so excited about this new series of our Courageous Leadership conversation series where I get to dig in with your favorite, my favorite, Dr. Rosie Ward, who hosts Show Up as a Leader. And we are breaking down something really powerful that has been in the works for so long. And we're going to learn all together, me being coached, and so you get to do it with me, for future-proofing leadership, which is the research project that has been in the works for, more than a year, hundreds of leader participants. So this is the new evidence-based grounding that Salveo Partners and Show Up as a Leader and all the work lives on. And so what better than to make this our coaching series? So I'm so excited today to dig in with Rosie. Rosie, this will be our 4-part series all year long. And today we're kicking off with why leaders are stuck and change is so hard. And so with that, since I've teased out this research project, also teasing out that the book is going to publishing soon, like you've signed your publisher. So future-proofing leadership, you're going to be able to get your book soon as well. And I'd love for you to take us back and introduce us to the why behind this research project of future-proofing leadership.
Thanks, Nikki. Well, I geek out about this, but here's the thing is, one of our core values is that sound science is your friend. So everything has to be rooted in sound science applicable for human beings. And so, yes, I have a PhD, and I didn't think I would be doing research, but here we are. And so I'm geeking out about this because my brain works in patterns. And over the years of working with teams and coaching leaders, probably thousands, I'm like, God, there is so much commonality. And every time we work with a team and work with a leader, we get this narrative where someone's like, oh my God, I thought it was just me. Am I crazy? Like people want this validation. Like they think there's something fundamentally wrong with them. And I would start going, I have now seen this probably 100 times. No, trust me, you're normal. And I just started seeing there's all these commonalities between what people are afraid of, what gets in their way, what keeps them from showing up as a courageous, authentic, kick-ass leader in their life. And I was like, man. So then when we launched Show Up as a Leader, so this had been happening for years. And then when we launched Show Up as a Leader, I was like, I want people to feel normal. I want to normalize this messiness of being human. So that's why in every single guest episode, I decided I'm going to ask the question of what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself? Because I know that when we're in that space, we think it's just us. And so I thought if they can be listening to this conversation of someone who is smart and insightful and has all of these valuable nuggets they can use. And by the way, this person's a human who also gets in their way. like you might feel a little less alone or a little less like there's something wrong with you. And so as we sat there, and this was, gosh, almost about a year and a half ago, I was like, we have so much data. We have, hundreds and hundreds of coaching data from this particular process we put people through called immunity to change. We have all of these leader interviews. Wouldn't it be interesting to start to actually look at that and see, like, intuitively, I know there's patterns, but what does the data actually tell us? And so then it started like, how do you find someone who's really good in qualitative data analysis? That's a feat in and of itself, who has bandwidth to take something on. And we got someone to dump all this data into various spreadsheets. And it was a year-long process of analyzing leader coaching data and taking the podcast interview data and looking at where do they intersect, where do we have specific insights just from the coaching, but specific insights also from the podcast. Because we also, my closing question is also, if you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice one behavior, what would that be? And so we just wanted to see, like, what are leaders saying they think is like critical for future human people-centric workplaces? Where do they get in their own way? What do we learn from coaching data? And we just started to kind of pull it all together and see, what did the data tell us? And we did see very clear patterns and commonalities. And we were like, what are we going to call this and what do we name it and whatnot? So, a couple things we learned that we're going to be unpacking in this series is, one, we identified what we're calling our faulty programming. So, what are the faulty programs that we have that are a set of mindset and beliefs that keep us stuck? And how do we identify those? And most people have more than one, and then do the upgrade process. So the work that we do with leaders and teams is upgrading that faulty program that gets in your way. We looked at what are the most common areas where leaders are actually wanting to grow and get better, like they're actively working on it, but motivation isn't enough. Like there's something fundamentally getting in their way. And we looked at what is the relationship between those goals and that faulty programming to help go, oh my God, we're approaching leadership development backwards, or this is why this isn't working, or whatever it might be. And then it was really fun to also then look at what were those behaviors that our guests on the podcast said they feel is really, really critical to have more human workplaces. And as we analyze those, we're like, holy crap, they actually align with the goals that leaders are working on. So there was just so much of like, oh my God, I knew I wasn't crazy. There's these patterns. So all that to say is, like, what I'm super excited about is that this is over 250 leaders that made it into our analysis pool, which is a decent chunk of leaders when you're looking at qualitative data across industries. And to go, okay, with what we've learned, we really feel like we've got some key insights when we say future proofing leadership at two facets. For those people who are listening who have that responsibility for an organization, how do we future proof leadership within our organization collectively? But then for the individual who's a human being, how do we future proof leadership within ourselves? And that's really the two facets that we looked at. And that's what we're, yeah. So anyway, that's my long-winded, but that's how we got here. And I'm super jazzed about it and all the how we're going to unpack it and what people can do to use it. And because the trajectory we're on isn't pretty. So we've got to go about it a different way.
Yeah. Well, I will say just compliments to you and the work that you're doing, the way you painted the why and the things that you're finding. My energy just, or maybe anxiety or stress. We are recording on a Monday and I'm just like feeling overwhelmed. We have so many new changes. We've got a few things that are like stuck. And you're like, hey, something you said, like normalizing the messy, figuring out where to meet that particular challenge and why it's there. And you're not alone. Whatever you said, I'm like, oh, I can kind of relax now. I was feeling a little stressed. Okay. So
Then oh, thank God
thank
I'm
you for that.
human. Okay.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot. Sometimes we all just need that reminder. So thank you. As we continue down this path, I'm really excited to dive into, some of the trends that you've been finding. And I also remember I was on a call with your team and there was this verbiage being thrown around and I felt like, I'm like, did I miss something? What are they talking about? And you were saying something like VUCA, VUCA. And I know that has something to do with like the understanding of like today's work environment and the like limitations, the things that are causing us to fall short. There's something around this VUCA thing though. Can you dive into that?
Yeah, I love it. You're like, what the hell are you saying? And I can't take credit for that acronym. It is VUCA, VUCA. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it's been around for decades, but I want to say probably the last 10 years, almost every leadership book you pop open actually calls it VUCA or spells it out or whatnot. And why I like starting with that is, as human beings, we make sense of our experiences through language, through story, through narrative. And VUCA gives us language to kind of normalize that messiness to say, oh, yeah, that's right. We live and work and lead in a world where disruption is the norm. And disruption was the norm long before COVID, long before, present day. But the last many years have been kind of like VUCA to the extreme. And that VUCA-ness, if you will, that disruptive nature is not going to slow down anytime soon. It's only ramping up. And so why I like starting with that is because we tend to, as human beings, want to have some level of predictability or certainty that just flat out doesn't really exist in a VUCA world. So it's more about how do we equip ourselves and others to recognize it. Like I usually will joke and go, "Oh, your plane flipped over, VUCA, right? My technology isn't working, VUCA, right? This didn't work." Like I literally call it out, and we just go hashtag VUCA because it becomes just a way of like, "Yep." I mean, what are you going to do, right? Life is going to do what it does. So not only does it help you kind of normalize it and not get so frustrated, but the other thing is that, let's be honest. I mean, if you think about even AI and all these other things, like disruption is how we evolve and grow and where we have really good advancements in research and technology. But disruption, the problem with it is that it bumps us up our biological wiring for certainty, for self protection, to feel safe, to feel in control. And so our self protective instincts in a VUCA environment kick in really, really hard. And the more kind of VUCA our world gets, the more those self protective instincts kick in. And we have this widening gap that is showing up. And so we've named this gap the stuckness zone because we didn't know what else to call it. But it's like this stuckness zone we get trapped in, and it's the disconnect between what the future and current world demands of us and our innate biological instincts and wiring. And the reason why things are harder than they need to be is that we are in this stuckness zone and we have to figure out a way to reconcile that gap, basically. We have to figure out a way to either somehow make the VUCA world less disruptive, which I don't think is going to happen, or we have to figure out a way to kind of upgrade our humanity and move beyond that really just hardwired self-protective nature that keeps us from being able to meet the demands thrown at us. So that's where VUCA comes in. Yeah.
And I love how you call this the stuckness zone, naming it exactly what it is that all of us can relate to. Also, because then I'm like, what's VUCA again? I get the stuckness zone. Got it. Yep. Been there many times. And I'd love for you to maybe share a story or an illustration of a leader or leaders you've worked with where like their ability to thrive through the stuckness or overcome the stuckness is there because of these applications. You know what I mean? Because nobody wants to be stuck. Nobody wants to be thrown off by VUCA completely, right? And so on the opposite side, when we're learning through this research and then we're applying these things to be able to stay grounded and not let that stuff throw us off completely and ripple effect on our teams, like give us the other side of what that looks like to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, 100%. One of the leaders is coming to mind because I actually coached them earlier today. They're an executive for one of our clients. And, we always think, oh, executive leaders have it all together. No, they're a human being. So just put it out there, right? And this particular executive was a new member on the team. And as we were unpacking, like this person wanted to be better at setting boundaries. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Wanted to be better at being more fully present with their family. They felt like as an executive of this organization that's very fast paced, high growing, that they had to constantly be on, constantly be available. They had this thing about being responsive that was really, really critical. And they also had this sense of like moving away from their previous role in the organization that they didn't want to quite let all of that go because that was like their backup plan. Because what if I suck at being exec and those types of things, right? So this is all very, very normal stuff. And so what we did is, first of all, when we identified that this person wanted to get better at boundaries and better at being more present and, delegating and not being in everything, we had to look at really mapping out all the ways this person is getting in their way. And then we had to get to the yuck factor. What is it that you're ultimately afraid of? And kind of what's that underlying programming or those underlying assumptions that are getting in your way? Well, this person had this sense that their value comes from being productive. We call that the overachiever program, which I know we're going to talk about later. They also had a sense that if they weren't immediately responsive to people, that people were going to think they didn't care. So therefore, they were constantly feeling like, oh, I can't not have my phone with me because if I don't respond immediately, someone thinks that I don't care, that I'm not effective. And so you can start to see if that's this underlying narrative or programming they have, no wonder why they never unplug. They're always on, all these types of things. But there's this wiring that tells them they have to do this. So what we did is we started to look at, okay, where did this come from? It's kind of like you have to look at, like, if you're sick with something, you have a condition, you have to look at, like, what makes it worse, what makes it better, where did it come from, and then craft a treatment plan. Well, that's kind of what we did. So this doesn't happen overnight, but we're like, okay, where did this come from? Right? Where did this warped value proposition, newsflash, first 10 or so years of your life? Okay, so you're not 10 anymore, but we have to understand where it came from. Then we looked at, what are all the ways you're getting in your way, and how is it hijacking you current present day, and what does it cost you when it's hijacking you? And then we start to go into a very intentional process of the upgrade. So it would be little things like, okay, you think that you have to be immediately responsive. I want you to interview people that you think have been on the poor receiving end of your responsiveness, probably your family, probably some of your colleagues, of what is it like for them to be around you when you're in this mode of having to be constantly responsive. Got some pretty gnarly feedback from their family about, you're not present, whatever, don't care, blah, 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 blah. And those relationships are kind of not where they could be. You get other people that are like, feel like you're stepping on my toes, that you don't trust me. Like, got some pretty good radical candor feedback that had them go, holy moly. That didn't do it by itself, but it's like, okay, that starts the, oh, maybe I need to show up differently. Well, then we start to test the waters with things like, okay, well, now that you have this feedback that tells you this isn't that helpful, can we pick like one night a week you're not going to check your email? And like, does the world blow up? Does everyone hate you? Like, it's like you're inching into the shallow end of the pool and finding ways of how can you try something that is a little scary, but that is kind of the antithesis of what this programming tells you is safe, acceptable, until they get to a point of, now they're fully present with their family and unplugging and taking vacations and delegating because they did the intentional work to upgrade. They've let go of this safety net of, oh, like, when this exec thing fails, here we go. And like, I can't believe I even thought that way. Having more courageous conversations, all of the things that kind of go with being able to have boundaries. And it was about a 8-month process. I'm not going to say this was overnight, but it was very deliberate. And what's super, super cool is they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that was me. So, like, if you do a little bit of work, it's hard work, but like, that's what's really cool and what's possible when you think about, this is an exec of an organization that's high growth, whatever, like, what a different tone that leader is going to be setting for the culture as well, because that programming isn't hijacking them and they're modeling different behavior. That you couldn't just give them an LMS module or a class and go, here, set boundaries. Huh, yeah, nice try, not going to work, when someone has that underlying programming that says bad juju is going to happen if I do that.
Well, and the gift of that leader doing the deep dive work to start to create those boundaries, which becomes like, I'm seeing this as you've created a framework, and then a toolbox, reminder, if you will, or tactic is the boundaries. We're going to try one day a week. And then we start to build that as a habit. When that leader starts to model this, watch all of the other people's lives that are better because they start to have boundaries, right? Because we tend to follow the way that leaders are modeling the way we work, right? That's culture. And culture, whether you're working on it or not, it's this set of actions, and so it's the gift that all that follow this leader get to embrace as well. And I'll tie it in because of what I'm seeing here, and I'm learning so much. I have all these terms on my screen that I have to ask you about today, like
I love it.
VUCA, other things. But I'm like applying this to a time in my life when I hired my first coach. I grew up with a perfectionistic mom who was so proud to be a perfectionist. Like, she had a badge around this, had straight A's. I don't know if she ever got a B in all of high school or whatever. As her daughter, it put so much pressure on me, and all I thought was perfection is the way, right? And I was so stressed. I had so much anxiety. And then when my coach came to me, we learned a practice called cancel. And it would be these things that I would embrace that were perfectionistic. That cancel would remind me I'm leaning towards excellence, and that's me giving my best today. It's actually part of our culture at PeopleForward Network now, that we are fighting against perfection, and we are working towards our best every day because we're human and life's messy, right? And it's just not feasible to show up as perfect, but there's still so many people that get to learn that lesson, and I hope that for everybody. But I'm like, that's a way of applying like the framework, right? Because that was my learning. I've got a lot more, but just to give an example, I'm in the realm.
Oh, yeah. Well, and actually, I would say that, not to give it some way, but the perfectionist is one of the faulty programs that we identified. Hardcore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So there you go. Like, when we went through that, I will tell you, there's 7 faulty programs, and then there's 3 cousins. And the reason we call them cousins is they showed up in enough prevalence in the data and they are unique, but they didn't stand alone. Everybody who had a cousin program was also running one of the core faulty programs. Like, they were never in isolation, so that's why we call them cousins, because they showed up in different ways in tandem. But anyway, I share that because when we did all this, I was like, well, for the love of God, I'm running at least 4 when my humanity hijacks me. So here we are. So I'm with you. Perfectionist is one that I think that of all of them is one that I have, for the most part, upgraded really well, but man, it's taken a lot of work, and you think it's easier said than done. So all these people that are out there that talk about, progress, not perfection, that's great, and mantras are great, but doesn't work if you have a faulty program called the perfectionist. There's work you have to do with your coach, with other things to get to a point where you truly can embrace your humanity. And I bet, Nikki, there's probably still times where you're like, oh, it rears its ugly head, and you're like, damn it.
Oh, yeah. Thank goodness I've had more than a decade or nearly 2 now, to be able to keep applying that, but that cancel has been my tool that anytime it creeps in, it's helping me get to what do I believe now? I believe that excellence is the way and that shifts. That's agile, right? It's me giving me my best, and only I can answer to that. Like, there's no one else that can tell me what excellence is. It's my test, for myself. But anyway, while we're here, you talked about overachiever perfection. You said the 7 faulty programs, which is what the book and the research breaks down, and then the 3 cousins. Do we want to touch on that just really quick? Because I know we're going to be talking about them throughout the series, but just kind of share those with us. And then I want to go into this concept impression management, which is a new thing for me as well.
Yeah, so everyone listening in one of our future episodes, don't worry, we're going to unpack all these, and in the book we're actually working on an assessment to help you kind of see which ones are you. And I will just tell you anecdotally, so since we started to uncover this in the data last summer, it was like, oh, I'm going to test this out. So I would start infusing it into talks, into keynotes. I would start infusing it into workshops, and just to kind of see, like, get a pulse check of, okay, right? Because that's, you look at the data, but then you got to kind of do a litmus test. And I would say, like, if any of these resonate with you, raise your hand, and every single person's hand go up. I did a workshop a week and a half ago where we had the faulty programs, and I just did the faulty programs. I didn't do the cousins because we know that they go with another faulty program. And then I asked people to rank the top 3, because we all have more than one. I don't know anybody that only has one faulty program, at least in our data set. Like, they have at least 2. Actually, there's a couple people who have 1, but it's pretty rare. Most of the people have 2 plus.
And I'm gonna guess that most people are like, "Oh, that's me," right? Like, it's not hard to pick out your top 1, 2, or 3.
It is not hard. So even without a nice official assessment, we're hoping we can add that into the book. Like, it is not hard. You're like, oh crap, yep, that's me. And it's funny because then I had them, like, rank their top 3, and then this was an in-person workshop, so I had them go stand, but just by their top 1. Okay, those of you that are counterfeits, go stand over here. Those of you that are people pleasers, go stand over here. Those of you that are perfectionists, those of you that are martyrs, those of you that are mimes. So you're getting the names of them. So here's your little preview. And then they were like, oh, okay, so like martyrs feel like boundaries, like, no, like, they need to sacrifice their own needs. Their needs don't matter. They need to put the needs of everybody else. They like to feel needed, but then they feel resentful. So I go to the group of martyrs and I say, let me guess, you guys have a lot of issues with your calendar, and you have a lot of issues with boundaries. And like, yeah. I'm like, so when people tell you to schedule time to work on the business, or you schedule reflection time, you schedule over it, don't you? And they're all like nodding. How do you know this about me? I'm like, because welcome to having the martyr programming. And then what I said to the group, and the VP was there, I said, so think about this. What do we typically do with people who have prioritization, time management, or boundary issues? What do? We send them a LinkedIn learning module, or we send them to a productivity course, or we give them tip sheets, right? On how to manage their calendar. That's not going to work for these people, because they're not going to use them, because they're like, there is something fundamentally that tells them, no, 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 my needs don't matter. Nope. If someone needs me, I'm there for them. Nope, I can't honor this time. Until they upgrade that programming, they're going to struggle with their calendar, and they're going to struggle with boundaries, and they're going to struggle with prioritization. Or I go over to the people pleasers, fairly self-explanatory, but I'm like, let me guess. You all have been through courageous conversations and crucial learning conversations, but you still struggle with growth feedback conversations, don't you? And they, like, look at each other and look at me. I'm like, mm-hmm. Because as long as you're running a people-pleasing program that tells you you might jeopardize a relationship, or someone might be mad at you, and therefore you're not liked, not lovable, none of that training is going to work until you upgrade that people-pleasing program. And they're like, damn it.
This is a whole new version of Rosie in my pocket. It's like, how do you know that? It's like you really brought it to life.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not psychic, but this is what the data tells us. And so then like the leader of this whole group, it was this huge leadership team, and she's like, "Oh my god, I feel so normal right now. I'm glad I'm not alone, and I feel so seen." And that's what I'm so excited about this work of like, welcome to being human. And the reason why you've struggled and you've been through a gajillion, perhaps coaches and training, it's not working because that programming has not been upgraded. So here you go.
Truly the picture of a tree that I see right now, and, you've seen this in different, leadership teachings, but it's the roots stuff. It's like you were talking earlier about, like, the tactical tip sheet. Here's your go-to for what to do during, but that's, like, above the soil. Right? And we gotta get to the roots of so much of this, and we'll continue learning about the 7 faulty programs and the cousins in future episodes, but those are the roots of identifying these things that anchor us or stuck, that keep us stuck, right? So
I love that analogy though, because you can trim the tree, you can put fertilizer, you can put all the different treatments, you can put lights on the tree, but if the roots below are on the struggle bus, it's
yeah,
yeah.
and that's the hard work, that's the inner work, that's the deep stuff when people are like, "Wow, she or he really worked on themselves." That's
It's
it.
the courageous leadership
The
work.
courageous leadership work. Man, is this series named right. Okay, so Rosie, again, through this research, and I'm just digging in, but there's so many things I'm trying to just understand the verbiage. Impression management. There's this term in the research. Can you talk about that? Bring that to life.
Yeah, so one of the things that and I actually can't take credit for this. This is from Dr. Bob Keegan from Harvard and Immunity Change, but he said something years ago that has stuck with me that is so true and really is the foundation of what we've seen in our work over the years and the research is that most organizations, so bear with me people, but I want you to listen to this. Most organizations are unintentionally paying us for a second job that they never intended and never hired us to do. That second job is impression management. And what I mean by that is that we spend an enormous amount of time and energy and bandwidth trying to manage other people's impression of us, trying to look favorable in the eyes of others, trying to look good and avoid looking bad. And not only does it waste a whole lot of time and energy and it keeps people from showing up authentically and all kinds of issues, but it's exhausting. And so if we go back to these 7 faulty programs and the 3 cousins, each of those is a version of impression management, right? So if you think about it, like if I have like Nikki, you have a perfectionist faulty program that likes to hijack you from time to time. Well, you're spending a lot of energy trying to be just as perfect or have people not see your flaws. And it's like, oh my God, if you could just like have an authentic conversation, think back like 10 plus years ago before you had your cancel tools, right? Like how much energy it wasted. Or people who have people pleaser. I'll just because since I talked about them and they are in a leadership role and they have to have growth feedback conversations, how much energy they spend ahead of time getting emotionally wound up and how they, however they get through the conversation and how much time afterwards they spent ruminating and replaying or whatever, where it's like if they could just have it, move on and let go, you have so much energy emotionally, mentally, physically available for other things. So that's what we mean by impression management is when any one of these faulty programs are in the driver's seat, we are trying in one way, shape, or form to manage what other people think of us. And it fundamentally gets in our way versus can we just show up authentically human and take the mask off, take the armor off, and just dig in and do good work and have real authentic conversations. That's what we mean by impression management.
And you may have just said where I was gonna go next is, like, to illustrate what healthy impression management looks like, right? With someone that doesn't allow this to consume and is the second job, right? They're, like, operating from their natural self, like, can you think of someone that maybe you could model out? Like, here's what that looks like.
Yeah, so I would say and people use the impression management term differently, like, we actually have one of our assessments that talks about impression management, and I always have to flip it and say, "Well, it's conscientiousness because we use impression management in this not healthy way." So I think definitions are important because here's the thing, we do need to pay attention to the impact we have on others, right? If I'm showing up like a butthead, I don't be like, "Ah, I'm just being authentic." Like, no, you're showing up as a butthead, right? So I think impression management, when it's unhealthy and driven from scarcity and we're managed and trying to look good and all this stuff, it's where it gets in the way of psychological safety. It's the faulty program. We're pretending to be something we're not. We're overcompensating, all of those things. If we think about, I'm going to shift it from like healthy impression management to more like conscientiousness, maybe, is that we are paying attention to the impact we're having on others. And we can recognize, like, oh, I'm like trying to control freak is another one. I am trying to over control the situation. I'm going to back off and like regulate and manage my control tendencies to give someone else an opportunity to shine. Or you think about your perfectionist. It would be, nope, this doesn't need to be perfect, because if I am letting that run the show, other people are going to take cue from me, and then there's going to be fear of failure, low psychological safety, etc. So conscientiousness around perfectionism might be like, here we go. Like, we all screwed up, embracing my humanity. What'd you learn from this? Great. What do we want to do better next time? Thank you for bringing that forward. Right. Or like for me with perfectionist, I basically, you said you do the cancel, cancel. I just am like, well, I'm embracing my humanity today. Here we go. And I just kind of call it out. One, then other people can kind of laugh, but two, then it also calms me from getting into like a shame spiral. So, or if my overachiever tendencies are kicking in and it's impression management, I might start like taking on all kinds of stuff and getting overproductive and taking on things I don't need to and packing my calendar. If I'm conscientious, instead of that taking over, I might be like, okay, I know that I need to have space available. I need to have office hours. I need to hold that space. Or I know that if I don't have buffer time between my calendar, I'm not going to show up in the way I want in my next interaction. And so I'm very cognizant of the impact I have around me. And if I want to have a match between my intention and impact, and I want to maximize my positive impact around me, there's certain ways I have to show up. That's conscientiousness or healthy impression management versus the impression management where we're trying to like avoid looking bad.
Yeah, the words that were coming up for me as a recovering perfectionist is posturing. How much time it would take to make sure that I look the way rather than just, let's just have a real conversation around this didn't work. I messed that up, right? And embracing failure, which now I'm starting to see like one of my favorite things we've done at PeopleForward Network is our culture code. That's another one of our culture codes outside of practicing excellence is embracing failure. Right. And I'm like, where'd that come from? My background in posturing. Right. And then you feel like,
Yep.
what do you feel like when you're posturing is it wasn't life-giving. Like whatever that was, it didn't feel good. Like in the beginning when you were introducing the why behind all this, and I was like, I already feel better about just going into this conversation. I was a little stressed. Can't put a price tag on that. That's the stuff that, gosh, it's just meaningful life stuff.
100%. Yeah.
I see that our time, as per always, is just flying by. And in our first episode of our series this year, why leaders are stuck and change is so hard. Just want to make sure we didn't miss anything on the areas of things we wanted to cover in this initial episode.
Yeah, I think the only other thing, if we're going to talk about why we're stuck and why change is hard, and we've alluded to a lot of different things, but I think there is one other critical piece that kind of gets into like when I was giving the example of like people with the martyr programming struggling with their calendars. And that is when we think about moving through change, and we know that the only thing constant in this world besides death and taxes is change, is being really, really cognizant of what type of change we are trying to move ourselves and other people through, because it requires a fundamentally different approach. And this is also what we found from our data of where things go astray. And so there's two different types of change or two different types of challenges. There's what are called technical, which are straightforward. There's a known solution. You can use existing thinking, knowledge, and skills to solve it, or you could very easily obtain it. So like Nikki, if you wanted to get better at PowerPoint, you could go take a module, take an online class, look at some YouTube videos. Here's all the tips and tricks. It's pretty like standard. Here you go. Or you could delegate it to somebody, or you could go hire someone to make a deck for you. Boom, problem solved, right? What you need to solve a technical change or technical challenge is information, period. And it's pretty straightforward. Standard operating procedures, checklists, extrapolate from situation A to B. You're done. Groovy. But there's this whole other type of challenge, which is where the messiness of our humanity and the stuckness zone starts to come into play. And that's called an adaptive change or an adaptive challenge. And in an adaptive change situation, you actually have to let go of what you know. You have to let go of what is familiar. So it elicits that sense of loss. We don't like that as human beings. We want familiarity. We want certainty. And so it throws us against that faulty programming, and it throws us into the stuckness zone because we can't take what we've known. We have to kind of go, nope, it's like the what got you there won't get you here. As an example, so I'll go back to the people pleaser courageous conversation. So let's say I went into a leadership team and was going to do a courageous conversation training on how to have these growth feedback conversations. Great. If for your team, that was a technical challenge for them, that all they needed was information. So the conversation checklists and conversation starters and structure and framework of how to mechanically have this conversation, they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. And they're off and running. Fantastic. That was a match because it was a technical challenge for them and I gave them information. But let's just take the people pleasers. If for them, they sat through that training, they're like, I don't really care. That stuff is now sitting in a drawer. It's sitting in a file somewhere. Hell if I'm going to use it, because they want to throw up in a garbage can at the thought of using those tools, using that information. That's an adaptive challenge for them. And so until we address what makes that adaptive or makes it cringy, they're not going to use the information. So when we're in an adaptive change situation, we need transformation. So in technical change, information. In adaptive change, transformation, which is where the upgrade process and that inner messy work comes in. And so often we want the quick fix easy button that we treat adaptive challenges like they're technical problems. And we wonder why they don't work. And so one of my favorite quotes, and all this work comes from Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky, they say the single biggest failure of leadership is to treat adaptive challenges like they're technical problems. And we do it all the time because we want that easy button. And the reality is most of the changes that we face individually and collectively have a little bit of both. Meaning there's stuff that we can learn, there's information, skills, knowledge that we can gain. Yes. But the overwhelming majority, when you think about engagement issues, culture issues, well-being issues, the list goes on, there's largely an adaptive component there that we're not recognizing, we're not caring for. And we just think if we keep scooting around it, that somehow, it's going to magically get better, and it's not. And it's like we just need to go right to the heart or the roots, as you said, and do that transformative or transformation-based work is the only way that we move through adaptive challenges. And so when we think about being future ready in this VUCA world, which is one adaptive challenge, one adaptive change after another, and that's what we saw when you see these leaders that want to get better at something, but why can't I be better at growth feedback conversations? Why am I struggling with boundaries? Because it's probably an adaptive change for you. And we got to figure out what's the adaptive part. And then how do we find the way for you to embark upon transformation? Because information is not what you need at that point.
So good. Oh my gosh, I've loved this. I have no idea how our time flies by, but I can't wait for our next one. Future Proofing Leadership. So the book coming soon. We'll let you know the launch date. Maybe on the next episode, we'll be ready to share that launch date for the book going live into the world. But for now, there is a courageous leadership program coming up, and all of this is getting infused into the program. Like this is part of all of the courageous leadership series that you've heard. So great opportunity to jump in. It's in April. I think you're giving away some coupon codes.
Yeah. So we'll put this in the show notes. So there's two things. So we do our courageous leadership program, which is anyone in the public can sign up. If you use the coupon code podcast100, you will save $100 on it. Our next one is April 29th and 30th. We also have one, I think, in September or October. But it's basically over 2 days. It's virtual. And we go through all kinds of stuff to help you start that upgrade process, which is very cool. And then we also have our white paper with our results that also has some stuff in there about how to start the upgrade process and more details on what we learned that you can unpack in the meantime. And that's at salveopartners.com. If you go to where there's white papers, you can download it. It's also called Future Proofing Leadership.
Well, Rosie, this has been so lovely. I cannot wait until the next session already. I wish I could tease out episode number 2, but the truth is I could only get through episode number 1, research and all the language that I needed to learn. So I still got to take time to prep for that, but I promise you it'll be just as good. So we'll be back next quarter with episode 2 of our Future Proofing Leadership series here on the Courageous Leadership series. And check out the show notes for your discount code for the April Courageous Leadership series and jump in. Like the testimonials that we constantly hear from, our team, myself, like incredible. And this is like the best time. If you've never done it yet, now jump in because you'll get to know your top 3 of your 7 faulty, or maybe you've got a cousin. Don't you want to know? Dig in to be able to get to the roots. All right. We'll see you next time.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to PeopleForwardNetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.